If everyone would assemble, we will begin our meeting. Thank you so much for being here today. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone to the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for March 29th, 2022. Of course, we have here Mayor Kurt Wilson, Council Member Christine Hall, Council Member Peter Vanstrom, Council Member Lee Hills, Council Member William Morthland. The purpose of committee meetings are for the city departments to convey information to the mayor and city council and to discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda. And by ordinance, the committee consists of the mayor, members of city council, and the city administrator. The ordinance also mandates city administrator serve as chair of committee meetings. And this is a public meeting. However, it's not a public hearing. Therefore, while the meeting is open to the public, we do not generally take public comments or questions during committee meetings. Public comments or questions are received at the regular city council meeting held at 7:00 p.m. in the city council chambers on the second and fourth Monday of each month, and then on the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage citizens to engage our online platforms, and if you have any questions or need information regarding any matter, our staff is available to provide that information to you. We also encourage you to always access the City of Roswell website, and you can also download the City of Roswell app for information or to report concerns. I would also encourage the viewing audience to visit the city website and view the Mayor and Council's 100-day plan. Also view the video of Mayor Kurt Wilson detailing each project and initiative which comprises the 100-day plan. Excuse me. And I would also certainly like to mention today being Vietnam Veterans Day, and so we very much appreciate the great service of all of our Vietnam veteran heroes. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for the March 1, 2022 meeting. I'll entertain a motion of approval. Yes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Hills. Second by Councilmember Vanstrom. Any discussion there? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. The second item under administration, consideration to release donated funds in the amount of $10,000 for public art to the Roswell Arts Fund. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. This item is for a developer, PSH Buckhead, had done a development over off of West Side Parkway. And as part of that development, they donated $10,000 for artwork generally to be done on that site. Once the site was developed and built out, they worked with the Roswell Arts Fund, and between the two of them have determined that that site is not a good spot for public art, for access to be able to be used and appreciated. So the process is the city still has those funds. We need to release those to the Roswell Arts Fund, who is the one that handles the art projects within the city, in our city. So this request is for you all just to be able to approve releasing the funds so that those dollars can be used for public art somewhere else deemed appropriate by the Roswell Art Fund.
All right. You've heard Mr. Fisher. Thank you. Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Chairman, I move to approve this agenda item.
All right. Motion by Mayor Wilson, second by Council Member Vanstrom. Any question or discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor? All right. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is the consideration of a loud and unruly party ordinance. Mr. Petty, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hall, yes.
Thank you. I brought this forward and I worked, Mr. Petty drafted it, and we relied on his expertise in this area from his history in Athens, Georgia, where generally you see these things around college towns. And we've had issues in the city of Roswell with a lot of complaints about loud and unruly neighbors and things that are basically just outside of our code violation ordinance. So this is something that puts a little bit more teeth into our ability to maybe try and curtail some of these activities for the peaceful enjoyment of all of our community. And perhaps Mr. Petty can elaborate a little bit more about it.
Yes, I'll just add a couple of things. Councilmember Hall asked me to look at this. This was an ordinance, this is based on an ordinance that was passed in Athens, Clarke County when I worked there. And it does just a couple of things. It defines what a loud and unruly party is, and what it is there's a number of things that are already violations under our local ordinances. And it says if that's going on at this party, then that's a loud and unruly party. And if there's a loud and unruly party, this ordinance allows law enforcement to go in and either disband the party. It also allows law enforcement to hold the owners of the property responsible, not just the person who is committing whatever violation there is here. So in Athens in particular, what we were looking at was there was a house that was an Airbnb where the owner, it was being rented out every weekend, and the owner of the house was never there. So they could stop what was going on that night, but then the next weekend it's another group of kids. So that was sort of the genesis of this, where this came from. So it just gives a few more tools for law enforcement to try to stop some of these parties in residential neighborhoods.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Just to add on, Mr. Petty, have some of our neighbor cities, Sandy Springs, Dunwoody, passed similar things to this recently?
They have. They're not exactly like this one, but they're very similar, trying to address these big parties in residential neighborhoods.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions from Mayor and Council? Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would say, just looking at this on the face of this, Councilmember Hall, I would not be prepared to support this at this juncture moving forward without a great deal of study. I am hesitant to add, because my understanding, Mr. Petty, is that really the police already have the ability to act, other than, as you mentioned, the exception of if it's a rental and Airbnb, but that's such an exception that adding this much to the ordinance code for an issue that I don't think that is that outstanding. This is not Athens, Georgia. It's not a college town. It's not a party town. This looks like an excessive response to a very small problem, and I would not be in favor of moving forward on this kind of significant ordinance.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Hall.
So, Mr. Petty, what does this, what are the additions that this gives us the opportunity as a city to do in addition to what we can do, or how can we strengthen our current ordinance?
Well, so the main things that it sort of does is it definitely it strengthens the language in here that would allow the law enforcement to disband a party if this was going on. But it also allows for the property owner or the host of the party to be responsible for some of the actions of their guests, essentially.
Thank you. Yes, any further?
Yes,
Mayor Wilson?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Having spent a tremendous amount of time with the police chief over the last several months on a number of issues, this is the first time I've heard of this as a potential issue. And I'm not sure what the genesis of this issue is. I'm not sure. I haven't heard of a bunch of excessive parties in the city of Roswell that are causing undue harm to fellow residents. And so I don't know what really the purpose of adding this to our ordinance would be.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Hills. Councilmember Hills?
There we go. Is this addressing a case by case? I mean, is the way that this is written addressing a problem case by case?
Yes.
Because my concern is, well, number one, I think RPD does a good job. I'd like to see if they need backup on anything specific, as an example, but we have tons of graduation parties. I mean, this is a city that does graduation parties like it's going out of style. Not to mention, we're heading into barbecue season, 4th of July, Labor Day, and that's just at home. But those could be problematic, I realize, so I would hope that RPD would handle those in a manner that takes care of the residents next door. So I thought that maybe this was pertaining to multiple offenses, like if Councilmember Morthland continues to have these ragers that he has, that he would be, you know, have some, a lead up to his final sentence, but this is dealing with a one-off. I'm kidding, Councilmember.
What I would say is it's dealing with a single property. So I think in particular in Athens, this one property, they were kept on having a reoccurring problem there. So then you could give notice to the property owner when there was more than one event and deal with it, if that makes sense.
It does, but would that still pertain to, if Mr. Morthland only has one event? But if he continues to have it, so is this written specifically really more for frequent flyers that are problematic?
Right, and property owners who are not there. So if Mr. Morthland was having them, they're gonna hold him, the police are gonna come out there, and he's the property owner, he's on site, and whatever's going on there, they're gonna hold him responsible for it. It's when they can't really get that part of the ordinance is really when they can't get a hold of the owner of the property, and the problem is not the same people every time, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
you know, like an Airbnb, it's just a separate group of kids every time. That way, when there does become a ongoing problem, they can send notice to a property owner that lives somewhere else and try to get some sort of enforcement.
Is that not what occurs now with RPD? Would they not do that, go through that same protocol?
No, I don't think so. I mean, well, we'd have to talk to them, but they don't have the ability to charge somebody who wasn't there with a violation of a local ordinance if they weren't doing it. This sort of expands who can be held responsible for it, as opposed to just the person who's doing it, you know.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yes, Councilmember Morthland?
Has Chief Conroy put any feedback into this at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Councilmember Hall?
What he's put into it is a lot of officers' times that are dispatched quite frequently to some of the frequent offenders that we have no recourse to fine for these incidents that occur.
Okay, all right. Any further comment this time? Okay. Well, this is an item that would need a vote to move forward. I will entertain a motion at this time. Yes, Councilmember Hall?
So I would like to see this come back, and I would be prepared to make a motion that we get Chief Conroy's feedback in on this specific ordinance, and I'd like to bring it back after Chief Conroy has had an opportunity to give some feedback, and that would be my motion.
Okay, all right. There is a motion. Do we have a second for bringing it back after review by the police chief and his staff?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morthland. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion? All right. It passes unanimously, so we'll have this item reviewed and brought back for your consideration. The next item that we have is under community development. Item number 4, consideration of a text amendment to the Unified Development Code regarding Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to update the use tables regarding multifamily. Ms. Lenore Bromberg.
Good afternoon. All right. So as mentioned, and I'll give a little bit of brief history before I jump into the tables, you have advanced forward for initiation definitions to split out the definition of multifamily into apartments, which are for rent, and condos, which are for sale. So subsequent to that, once we had that approval to move forward those definitions, we've brought back for you tonight to consider the use tables that would be associated with those definitions. And as mentioned, they are located in Articles 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And these are all included in your packet. And the way we've presented these is that we've just pulled out the line item specifically as it's included as multifamily in each of these tables. And the recommendation is that for the, as presented on the slides, is that the definitions for apartment and condominium would be split out. And then we currently are showing the exact same whether it's limited, permitted, or conditional use, is mimicked exactly the same as it was for multifamily as a single line item. It's just it's split into apartment and condo. So those are found, is mentioned in Article 3. These are your residential zoning districts. And then in Article 4, you have commercial, RX, NX, CX, et cetera, which are corridors and nodes. And then for downtown, which is your downtown historic areas, DR, DX, DS, and DH. And then in the employment areas, which are your office, OR, OP, as well as the industrial mixed and industrial light areas. Then Article 7 is civic, where none of this is allowed, but we want to make sure we just carried it through consistently through all of the tables. So we've basically showed the exact same references through all of these tables, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about them.
Thank you, Ms. Bromberg. Any questions or comments from Mayor and Council?
And I have a
Yes.
clarification on
Yes.
process. The definitions have been initiated, and I believe they'll go to Planning Commission next month. So if this were recommended to be moved forward for initiation at council, our goal would be to try to get on the next available council meeting, and hopefully get it on Planning Commission together and put them back together, merge the two together as one item. Otherwise, they might be off by a month, but that's what we're hoping to do, just depending on your pleasure this evening.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
Just for clarity, is this the follow-up to Councilmember Vanstrom's request last week?
Well, this is actually Councilmember Palermo's request to go ahead and separate it out in line items.
On line items, okay, I was.
It's the item we brought forward to split out the definitions, which I think several people asked us to do. And this is following up on that, just to carry it through so we would have those definitions. And then once we knew you were comfortable with moving those definitions forward, we then did the use tables rather than trying to do them at the same time. We thought it might be simpler to bring it forward that way.
Thank you.
But yes, it is following up on that.
All right, thank you. Any further questions or comments? All right, all in favor of moving this item forward? Motion by Councilmember Vanstrom. I saw his hand first. And do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Morthland. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you so much. It passes unanimously. Next item is under transportation. Item number 5, discussion of developer request to improve and use Old Chadwick Lane. Mr. Skalski.
Actually, this item is going to be presented by Dave Cox, our planning
All right.
division manager, so.
Thank you, sir.
Ready, Dave?
Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Give me 1 second. Well, good evening. We have a unique request this evening from a developer who actually owns a parcel in the city of Milton. And as you can see, if you're familiar with this area of the very northern part of Roswell, the city limit boundary gets a little squirrely. And this is a little notch of Milton that protrudes into Roswell. So the parcel highlighted in red is what the developer is attempting to install. One of the things the developer has requested is access to Old Chadwick Lane. This is a public right-of-way that is entirely in the city of Roswell, and they would like to utilize it to put in a secondary access to their proposed development. So that would entitle, or that would basically mean that they would have to pave the road, and we'd have to discuss the future maintenance responsibility of the road. Currently, it is a gravel roadbed that the city of Roswell maintains. Our RDOT crews maintain it. It is a maintenance liability because gravel is not as simple as you think to maintain. But currently, the road doesn't have any real use because it kind of goes along, I'll just use the pointer. You can see it goes along this Litchfield subdivision, and there's really nothing back here. There's no homes back here anymore. This has all been bought up. Some of these residents utilize the road for construction access, we've learned. I was back there earlier today, and I think 2 of the homes were doing some grading work, and their construction crews were accessing it through the public right-of-way, which I believe is permissible, given it's a public road. But there's still a little bit of use, but they would be paving this 1/10 of a mile section. So the options we wanted to discuss with you is, A, would you like us to let the developer access our right-of-way and pave the road at their expense? B, tell them thanks, but no thanks. We would like to keep our road as is, as a gravel roadway. Or is there another option where we permit access and see if there's some type of financial arrangement to help fund the future maintenance responsibility? That's something we'd have to discuss with our legal department. Normally, we wouldn't require this of developers, but this is unique given the developer isn't in the city of Roswell. They're developing homes in the city of Milton. And just to give you some of the graphics they provided, this is not a sketch Roswell prepared. This is something the developer prepared. I wanted to put that out there. So they have about 6 or 7 parcels with some water detention, and the right-of-way boundary runs right here. I added the city boundary here, the label, so it kind of pointed out. But this would be the access point, and they paved this section up here. And this is just a few pictures of what the road looks like today. This is kind of an approximate, but I believe the city boundary runs right along this tree line, somewhere right in here, just off the roadbed. But you can just see it's a gravel road. There's a few maintenance problems. There's a big hole, a pit in the road here. It looks like someone put a cone in there. So that's something our maintenance crews have to go out and fill those patches for the right-of-way. So again, we just want to get your guidance on what Roswell DOT should do and how we should engage this developer moving forward.
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom, who owns the property in Roswell? Who's the property owner, and how much property do they have there that's adjacent to Old Chadwick Lane on the Roswell side?
Are you talking about these up here?
Yes, sir.
I believe this has all been conglomerated by the Litchfield development. I don't know if it's Toll Brothers or another developer who's trying to develop a new phase of Litchfield. I think it's phase 4.
Have we talked to that property owner?
Yes. They have submitted, I believe it's LDP. ComDev may have to step in and help. They have been trying to apply for LDP because they recently rezoned the property last autumn. And they're trying to build a new phase of their subdivision to the north of here, up in this area.
So that land would bring, with a future development by the developer in Roswell, where this land would be undisturbed.
This is actually the 4th phase, excuse me, the neighborhood, you see it on the bottom of the screen, it continues back, and then the phases of it continue to the north. So phase 4 was recently rezoned by mayor and council to Ag 43 in order to allow them to build a single-family phase of the subdivision. And so the backs of the houses in that subdivision back up to Old Chadwick Lane along the north side of Old Chadwick Lane. So their property lines, I'll go to the screen might be easier. The backs of their properties back up to these all the way down Old Chadwick.
All the way down Old Chadwick Lane.
And
So
then
that,
they also have some that back up to Arnold Mill Road as well.
so that will no longer be undisturbed property.
Correct. And they're in the preliminary plat phase right now for the 4th phase of the development.
And what is the perspective of the developer in Roswell, on the Roswell side of Old Chadwick Lane? Do they know of this potential request by the developer in Milton?
When we spoke to them, we mentioned there was another development. At that time, it was unclear who they were exactly. We weren't sure if it was another arm of them, if they had acquired it, or it's a separate developer, but it's a separate developer. It's not the same one. But they're aware there's another development in play here. It's a very early stage.
Have we talked to legal? What does our legal say? Have you talked to David? Sorry, Mike. Have we talked to legal? As you mentioned as the third option.
Yes.
And what's the advice of legal? What's the advice of legal?
Well, I think we just discussed it briefly today, and the third option was allowing them to repave it and then sort of trying to work with them to make some sort of donation essentially for future maintenance of the road, to cover future maintenance.
Yes, Councilmember Hall.
I have a question. So only half of the road would be paved and then it would be gravel all the way back. Is there any merit to paving the rest of the road down to the end so that you don't drive on pavement and then gravel if you go to the back? I recognize that's the back of those lots, but
I don't know if there's no frontage along this. There'd be no driveways tying to this, so there really wouldn't be a lot of value to paving it. It would just be left unpaved if we just left it alone.
I just wonder how it would look paved going into gravel.
Well, most likely, most people wouldn't be going back here. I mean, the only people when this is all done, assuming this all gets built out the way we think it might, I mean, you'd really only have these homeowners that might be going back there to use it, and then maybe some homeowners here, they might access it for construction purposes, but it's pretty rare, and pretty low activity.
Councilmember Hills?
The future development on the north side of Old Chadwick Lane, are those, you said that's potential phase 4 of Litchfield? And I'm assuming, I don't know, correct me, that Old Chadwick Lane would not be the front entrance for those new lots. They'd be coming in.
It would remain a dead-end road.
Okay.
If you lived up here in one of these new homes, assuming they're built, you'd have to come down the roadway around, down, and out this way.
Because my concern with paving it at all is encouraging more traffic back there for the residents. I know I wouldn't want that in my backyard.
Are you talking about here, right down
Yeah.
here, this little short area?
I mean, I know what my kid does on the weekends when he's here. Checks out strange little roads and sees what's back there. He didn't get any trouble, he's just looking around.
You don't think he's...
All right, Mayor Wilson.
So, Tom, what is the traffic count on Arnold Mill right there at that intersection of Old Chadwick Lane and Arnold Mill Road? Do you know what the traffic count is?
Not off the top of my head, no, sir.
Do you have a wild guess?
It's a lot.
And if I'm turning left, which way am I turning left? Am I going north?
Yeah, north is up this way. Cherokee County is just to the north of here. If you know where the old Army surplus store
Yes.
is, that little old helicopter,
Yes.
it's just off the map here. It's right up here.
So there's significant traffic there.
Yes, going into Cherokee County. Yeah.
Is it fair to, correct me, so from a traffic perspective, do I create an additional liability point making left and right-hand turns onto, is that a 20,000 car, 30,000 car, 40,000 car? Best guess, 20,000 car, 30,
Probably in the 20s.
in the 20s.
20s.
Do I create additional liability to my residents making left and right-hand turns onto that road?
Yeah, anytime you put in a new intersection, there's going to be additional risk.
So what is the value to the city, from your perspective, of agreeing to do this for the developer in Milton?
It doesn't have a lot of value because all
It
the
doesn't.
homes are in the city of Milton.
The
Dan?
only limited value is less maintenance in terms of it being a paved road versus the current gravel road.
So the real value proposition from a standpoint of, is there real, and I'm asking even for the Milton residents, am I adding additional liability potentially from a risk factor to my Milton friends and neighbors who live in the subdivision, that they come out of the street with this additional place because there's probably not going to be a light there? So I'm just assuming that I might be adding more liability to, even though they're not Roswell residents, perhaps I'm adding more liability to my Milton friends, just from the standpoint of maybe not having to do some update on the gravel of a road. Is that a fair calculation? If I just kind of synopsize, tell me, come back and tell me where I'm wrong, please.
Yeah, because can you go to the next slide? Just, yeah, doesn't that create two roads now going
Yeah, so this
Going
is their main
onto
entrance.
Arnold?
This is their main entrance in the city of Milton. It would tie in Arnold Mill Road, and then they want the secondary access along our road.
Are they required to have?
But I'm sorry, on Arnold, we go, yeah, up, so there's another entrance just at the other side of that other detention on the upper right?
Yeah, this is where they would connect, this is our road, this is in Roswell, and this is what they'd like to access and pave.
And then have, so two entrances into that small plot of land.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Am I seeing this right? Maybe the developer doesn't want to give up the land for a sale on a lot with putting in a cul-de-sac? I'm just guessing around.
I saw some of the, this is.
have theories.
This is Lenore Bromberg. My understanding from the original request that came in is that Milton has directed them that if they wanted to be able to develop this the way that it is, that they would need a second entrance and have to pave Old Chadwick for that second entrance, that their entrance couldn't tie to a gravel road. That is my understanding, that that was the request that came from the developer based on the feedback they got from the city of Milton.
Is that from
Or lot one
Milton or
could be
from the
cul-de-sac.
developer? Sorry. Yeah, did the developer tell you that, or did Milton tell you that?
That was in the email from the developer, so.
One question I have, if I may, the distance requirements, does that meet distance requirements, standard distance requirements for two entrances?
According, I don't know the distance, I'd have to pull it up.
Well, it's a pretty sophisticated drawing, as you can tell.
I'm sorry, while you're doing that, okay, well, I'll get you. Councilmember Hall, yes.
While you're looking for that, exactly to Lenore Bromberg's point, that for this drawing, that's what they have to do, but they have other options to do on this lot. For example, a cul-de-sac, do they not? Can they can just have a cul-de-sac property.
I'm not aware of what Milton's requirements are, but they would have the same number of lots if they had cul-de-saced it. So adding the extra connection doesn't lose a lot for them in the way that they have it configured. So I'm not sure if it's a requirement by Milton to have the second entrance, period, in the story. We honestly, in our conversations, didn't dig that up, just we're answering the direct question of, are we interested in the gravel road being paved?
Right. Okay. Yes, Mayor Wilson.
I would, with all due respect to Dan and Tom, thank you, and Lenore, I would, thank you for asking the question open-ended. I would respectfully submit to the committee that I would say thank you, but we're moving on down the road until there's perhaps a better understanding for the mayor and city council of Roswell. That would be my recommendation to the rest of the committee.
Councilmember Morthland?
Can you flip back to the, 2 slides ago? One. Yes. All right, so the Roswell area to the north up there, is it safe to say that that will be developed at some point in the near future? And the way I'm looking at this is I'm hearing what everybody's saying, but I'm thinking of that, if that is to be developed, what about the fire and rescue coming in and using that access as entry into our Roswell area? And if we're able to get a portion of this road, if not the entire road paved, that may be a positive thing that we can think about at this point.
We could certainly bring that up to fire, but for the development to the north of Chadwick, the phase 4 of the Grand Reserve at Litchfield, their only access that fire required to have from the new phase, this last phase that they would build to Arnold Mill, is an emergency only access at the very north end of that portion of the development. They did not require them to have any access off of Old Chadwick Lane.
Councilmember Hall?
Just to follow up on that, where is the access for that new development, for that new phase?
It's off of Grand Litchfield Drive. That's across the bottom of the screen that you're looking at.
Okay, so it's down lower and they'll access it to the west?
Yes, ma'am. At the very end of Grand Litchfield Drive, which is about another 5 parcels off of the screen to the left, there's a stub road, and that expands up into a series of cul-de-sacs all on the northern side of Old Chadwick Lane.
So effectively, all those houses that back up to that gravel road, just the ones further to the east could potentially have a busy road behind them, back and forth, people turning in by accident, turning around.
They could today because of the gravel road that's there today, but if it were paved, I'm sure that would make it look different.
Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
Based on that preliminary drawing, that's not a solid of what they're gonna do there. I mean, is that guaranteed? Because my concern is we're giving away a gambling chip. If, a negotiation chip, if we say, yeah, you can pave that, and we don't know exactly what's going in there, and assuring that our Roswell neighbors right there get adequate buffer.
That she's talking about off of Grand Litchfield, so that's the road that's
Okay.
gonna go into all these.
Yes. Are there any other questions or comments at this time? Any other questions or comments at this time? If not, this was a discussion item. And are there any conclusions reached by the committee at this time? Yes, Mayor Wilson.
Chairman, I just moved to thankfully pass on the discussion matter and say thank you very much. And until there's a new discussion area to bring up, I'd say I would recommend to the committee, thank you, but no thank you.
Thank you. I think that's very clear. No interest
right.
at this time.
Councilmember Vanstrom,
With the
yes?
caveat that when there's a final plan for what's going to be proposed there, wouldn't we want the ability to negotiate at that point on behalf of our residents and have it come back for discussion? Will it come back for discussion?
Well, it's in the city of Milton. I don't know if they're
it wouldn't-
required to give it to us.
Yeah,
I mean, we'd like to see it, yes, but I don't know how the requirement works on that.
Give what to us?
Their site plan.
The site plan, we could
We could
certainly
request
request
it
it.
and-
We could certainly
Right,
request
well,
and obtain.
they want to pave our road. So why can't we have that discussion?
Sure.
That's the final plan.
Is that,
What do you say? Can you formalize that?
Randy, formalize that, will you?
all right, so what I think I'm hearing is that once the plans, the preliminary plans at least, are formalized and there are dimensions associated with the lots and with the roadway and distance, that you would entertain having another discussion at that time pertaining to this issue. Any further discussion along those lines? What is the pleasure of the committee?
I will second the motion, the eloquent motion by, yeah, the eloquent motion, seconded.
All right, we have a motion then and a second. Yes, discussion? Yes.
Just a point of order, this is a guidance item. Why are we voting?
It was a discussion item, and I think the vote was to reach a level of consensus of what next action would be taken so that we would be clear for the record and for the staff. All right, so in that case, we have a motion and a second to provide direction. Any further comment? All those in favor? All right, thank you so much. All right, excuse me. All right, the next item we have, item number 6, is consideration of a blanket approval to perform right-of-way acquisition services and accept right-of-way options for the King Road Right Turn Lane Extension project in an amount not to exceed $50,000.
Hopefully, this is a fairly straightforward item. This is part of the King Road project, which includes improvements to King Road and Highway 92 intersection. This is approval of a blanket right-of-way agreement for a couple of parcels totaling about 9,700 feet of easement and 1,800 square foot of right-of-way, primarily on the western side of King Road heading north. So in your package, you have basically the parcels. This is the intersection. Could you zoom in just a little bit? Just to give you a sense, so this project now includes the Woodstock Road side, and we've merged it with the King Road side, and that project is moving forward. Actually, is going to have a budget amendment in this coming year. The current blanket right-of-way agreement will allow us to pursue, I believe it's 3 parcels in total on the western side of King Road heading north. And this is our standard procedure for acquiring right-of-way and easements, which we'll bring them to you in a package arrangement up front. If we stay under that budget, you will see those properties brought to you in closer for actual acquisition and a full council vote. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions about the project or the right-of-way agreements that are proposed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Skalsky. Any questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, go for it, long overdue, can't wait.
All right,
Hurrah, woo-hoo.
I
right.
second that.
all right. Any further comments? I'll then entertain a formal motion.
Motion to approve to move this.
Motion by Councilmember Hall,
Second.
second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none. All in favor? All right, thank you so much. All right, well, thank you. And we do have an additional item from transportation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mayor Wilson.
on this particular item for the consideration of the Oxbow Action Plan presented by Mr. Skalsky, I would like to request that public comment be a part. So I make a motion to the rest of the committee that public comment be a part of this particular agenda item.
All right, thank you, Mayor Wilson, for that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion on that particular item? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. Passes unanimously for this item. Specifically, there will be public comment. I do want to thank Mr. Skalsky and the team. I know that you have done a great deal of work in this area, and this project certainly holds a great deal of suspense and anticipation. We look forward to your presentation this evening. Mr. Skalsky.
Thank you very much. And yes, I would like to begin by recognizing both Dave Cox and Greg Nicholas, who have worked really hard. And one person who's not here, whose name you may not know, and that's Claire Bruce. She has been working extremely hard as our right-of-way acquisition coordinator to basically sort out what we need to do next on our right-of-way side. And I appreciate the note about public comment for tonight and going forward. All the materials that we have to present tonight will be available tomorrow morning. We were not able to get them ready in time to be part of the package. So I believe the intent is that the agenda package will be refreshed tomorrow with all of the content that you see tonight. And with that, let's get into this long-awaited discussion. A brief overview is just summarized here, and it follows along with what the mayor has mentioned during the 100-day plan for presenting the Oxbow Action Plan. So we will go through this, and beginning with the background information. Each of the points on this slide are significant. The one that I'm going to spend maybe a little more time talking about in a couple of slides is the project intent and safety. We also have the obligations that go with T-SPLOST and state law. This was a T-SPLOST 1 project that was approved by voter referendum, and that implies some requirements on the city for executing that project. We certainly ran into property acquisition and utility problems, which are well publicized, and we'll touch on those briefly, at least summarize those for the benefit of the public. Construction was slow, to say the least. It stopped completely in 2021 at about 1/3 complete, and we will provide an update on the current site. Back to project intent and safety. This was a diagram that was presented as part of a traffic study that was done in roughly 2011. And the way this graphic reads, each pair of arrows is a collision. And this is the intersection of the old Oxbow Road, Oxbow Drive, and State Route 9. There's about 47 or so of those over about a 3-year period. And to quote our former traffic engineer from that time, that's pretty significant. Not the most injury laden intersection. A lot of these ones in red, these are the denotation for injury-related collisions. A lot of these are black, slower impact, but it was a dangerous intersection. I've driven it for years. Many city staff are located down on Dobbs Drive, and Oxbow was one route to get there, and Highway 9 was always a dangerous intersection and usually avoided. That traffic study included a number of recommendations. This is an excerpt of those. This is the recommendations from the traffic study. And there were a number of recommended improvements to the intersection, which became the basis for a permit that we received in June of 2014 for a signal improvement project from the Georgia Department of Transportation on State Route 9. And this really begins the story of Oxbow when we included it in our T-SPLOST 1 project list for Tier 1. That was approved by the voters in November 2016 with a total budget at that time anticipated of about $7 million. A couple of significant events have already happened, which the city is well aware of and most of the public is as well. We ran into a lot of problems with the hardware store property in 2 separate sort of acquisition investments, if you will. One of 25 parcels, and that cost us quite a bit of money. The second item here that's already occurred is when we hired our contractor, the actual bids came in at 5.9 roughly, and we had a $3 million initial construction budget. But basically, today, we've already set aside $15.4 million for funding this project. And actually, before we go to that, I want you to call up the PDF. Did you load those? And I just want to flip to the left or the middle one, either one. Yeah, that's perfect. So 25 parcels, I mentioned them. This is the original concept graphic for the project. And around here, you see a whole lot of numbers. Those are the 25 parcels that are involved in some way, shape, or form with easement or right-of-way acquisition. So just to give you a sense of the extent of the right-of-way acquisition involved here, if you could go to the PDF on the, no, just let me take it from here. Sorry. For a point of background and clarification, each of those parcels has a history of its acquisition story, if you will. And one of the things that, we had problems, one of the things we haven't done yet, and this chart summarizes it, is really lay out the history of the acquisition of each of those 25 parcels. So this is all history. All of it is straight out of, for the most part, the Gerard and Davis summary of the project to date. I just wanted to put that out there. We've basically gone through each of those and resolved outstanding items with those in order to give you the opportunity of what it will look like to try to complete the project as soon as possible. That's option 1 on this slide. Everything you've seen thus far is history, and now we're going to start talking about moving forward. So we've resolved or understand and are resolving all known issues with properties, including negotiating problematic obligations and also negotiating a change order with our contractor, who is still willing to work with us. He's been on hold for a couple of hours, or a couple of years, sorry. Slight difference there. And has been both patient and cooperative in working with us to try to work out what it will take to complete the project. There were a couple other options that were discussed. One of them was, can we modify the design? Can we do something different since we've had to stop? And outline a couple of reasons why that's problematic. One is state law. One is that intersection permit that we have from the state. The third point is a design change is a significant time complication, let's just say. And I'll just leave it at, there are other conflicts in conflicting legal obligations that we've entered into with other property owners. And we have the unforeseen conditions to deal with potentially. The third option was, why don't we just stop the project and put it back the way it was? And we also have the same T-SPLOST issue of law requiring us to complete the project as best I understand it. Mr. Petty and Mr. Davidson have relayed. As it was not safe. As it is not safe. Currently, we don't have a road between, there is no Oxbow Road. It's buried in fill dirt right now between State Route 9 and Pleasant Hill. And we still have those other conflicts. So I didn't see either option 2 or option 3 as being particularly attractive, if at all feasible. So we've spent a lot of time on moving forward with option 1. One point I want to mention for those talking about design changes, and I left one important word off of that slide, which is significant design changes are a significant delay and challenge for us. But this chart pretty much summarizes our ability to influence cost is really high early in a project. That's the green line here. As we spend more and more time designing and eventually building in the construction phase, and we start spending a lot more construction dollars, it's extremely hard to influence the cost of a project. So we are hemmed in quite a bit by history. And that's just over any major infrastructure life cycle. It's really important to keep this in mind. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's super, super relevant in construction. Once you hit construction, the contractor is going to hit you for any delay that he's not responsible for. And that has hurt us in this case, although the contractor is not our main problem. What does it take to complete Oxbow as soon as possible? And this is the going forward plan, and we're going to come back to it again in a minute. But our proposal is tonight to brief you on the completion plan for both right-of-way acquisition and the contractor moving forward, briefing you and the public on what's required and the change order terms, which we have agreed to with our contractor, and be prepared to remobilize in April. If we proceed on that path, we can be substantially complete with the project with the road open in October of 2023. I believe that's a little bit in advance of the Christmas deadline that you set for us, Mayor. And we will have an incentive completion bonus for completing earlier than October 2023, and our contractor is very enthused in trying to achieve and get that bonus. So earlier I said the word significant design change is problematic, and the question that comes up is, what can we do? What could we change? And what we heard loud and clear from this mayor and council and from pretty much everyone in the public who has offered an opinion is traffic calming is really a priority in the city of Roswell. And we've done everything that's on this slide that we can do within the constraints of the law and the permits to try to improve the traffic calming aspects of the project as much as possible. So we've reduced the lane widths to 10 feet. We're going to add textured pavement in several locations. We're going to have median islands, one that existed, one new one at least. We're going to enlarge the landscape buffer along the project, and the textured crosswalks are going to be added in a couple of intersections. And for this, I specifically want to thank Greg, who did a lot of yeoman's work to sort out what could be done and could not be done on this project. And I'm going to switch gears again. I want to minimize that for a second. And why is this not? Hold on, there we go. There we go. No, let me see. So this image summarizes where those traffic calming elements are going to be on that same aerial. So we've got the increased landscape buffer largely along the northern side of Oxbow Road, and it continues up here as well as you head into Mimosa. The textured pavement was specifically included along that western side of Oxbow Road, really to set the change of you're coming off Highway 9, you're entering the historic district, slow down. And we're potentially going to be able to add a median island in here also to send that same message. So basically, we've tried to do as much as we can in the project to calm traffic where we can. And where that leaves us is with a little different cost picture to complete the project. This is the bad news, but the additional funds required to complete the project are a total of $3 million in terms of easement and right-of-way funding, and that would bring the total project to $18.4 million. Most of that is associated with cost escalation due to inflation over the last couple of years and a significant change in the pricing that our contractor is going to have to pay for unit prices. We've validated that and gone over it, and we actually have a letter from the contractor confirming our assessment and his assessment of the prices going forward, and we think that's a fair price. This is what Oxbow was back in about 2018, and unfortunately we can't go back even if we wanted to. But we can go forward, and this is what that new alignment would look like from a view from west to east. And I want to switch gears because this is a view of what it looked like when the hardware store was still there. But the site today looks like this, and now I'm looking from east to west, and that's no way to leave the intersection either. So we do propose to finish the project, and from this vantage point, this is the way that construction not necessarily will proceed in sequence, but the improvements that you see are all the proposed Oxbow intersection improvement project going all the way through the project, including the additional landscaping, traffic calming elements that we've been talking about. So with that, I would like to just leave you with the action plan as we see it, which is to complete the project as soon as possible. With your supportive, hopefully that's not a omen. We would propose, with your support, to bring a change order and the blanket right-of-way agreement to full council for a vote on April 11th and proceed with getting this project moving as soon as possible and completed as soon as possible. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, or more specifically, Greg will be ready to answer any questions that you might have about the project. And once again, thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Skowski, for providing us with an in-depth, detailed overview of the Oxbow Road Action Plan, which is certainly a component of the Mayor and Council's 100-day plan. At this time, we will certainly receive any questions or comments from our Mayor and Council. Yes, Council Member Hall.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for the tremendous amount of work that you and your team have put into this. I mean, it's not a happy topic for all Roswell residents and staff. Can you speak to the additional funds? Are those funds that we have reserved already, or is that additional funding that we'll need? And also, how likely is it over prior administrations and prior directors, additional funds were constantly requested, and we were told this was the last time funds were going to be requested, and that was just in my short 2 years on council. So what kind of assurances do we have?
That is the $3 million question. And I would say one point that I did not make was, and I'm glad I included it in the title of this slide, but if there is any good news here, it's that our T-SPLOST revenues have proceeded a little bit ahead of our plans. So they did recover a bit after COVID-19. And T-SPLOST 1 does have unallocated sufficient funds together with the remaining funds that are in the project. There's about 200, I think, and 40,000 that's not encumbered yet or obligated yet in the project. And there's about, the remainder is available in the T-SPLOST fund right now, which I've confirmed with Ryan multiple times over the last several months. And we have it available through T-SPLOST, which would not encumber any additional general funds.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any chance of revisiting cut through to Elm?
Excuse me, sir, we're going to get to public comment in just a moment. We want to make sure we do that. I wanted to make sure that we offered mayor and council an opportunity to provide any questions or comments first, but we certainly want to receive all public comments and questions. Thank you, sir. Yes, Councilmember Hall, I think you had a follow-up.
Just a follow-up question. I know you've done an excellent job looking for any unforeseen surprises. Would you basically say that we're in the final 20% stage and it just needs to get done?
Yes, and forgive me, I didn't really respond to your other question, which is what assurance do you have that this is the last of these change orders? And I can tell you that we've eliminated a tremendous amount of uncertainty about pricing in the last 6 months. So the property issues are resolved. The contractor's quote is firm, and I've got that in writing. And we do have two things really working in our favor. One is we have a modest amount for unforeseen conditions included in that $3 million that I just mentioned to you. So we have the ability to respond quickly and address any other risk issues that may come up. And I think you've got very firm commitment, very aggressive schedule, and that is going to save the city money. If we can move now with this contractor, there's no better time than right now to aggressively push for completion of this project.
All right, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Morthland.
The completion date is December 2023, correct?
The mayor's
That's
was Christmas of 2023. Our contract substantial completion date with the contractor is October, I believe it's 10 of 2023, with a target of completing as early as July 1.
and there are the early completion incentives that roll all the way through up
Yes,
until.
the incentive is prorated between July 1 and his substantial completion date of roughly October 10th, 100 days, $1,000 a day.
So after we get past October the 10th, then the early completion incentive goes away.
And he starts paying us.
That's what I'm getting at, yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, any further comments for mayor and council? Yes, Councilmember Vanstrom.
I just want to recognize publicly that this is another great example. In just the last 2 months, we've been on council and getting things going, 2 or 3 months. We've had Public Works saving us money, we've had the IT saving us money, and we've had transportation and finance combining to find funds available to make this project come to fruition without further cost to the taxpayers at this point. We've crossed our fingers. But I just want to recognize you for that and thank you for that, because it's incredible what this staff does for this city, and I think the public needs to know that.
Thank you, Councilmember Vanstrom. All right, Mayor Wilson.
Greg, Dave, congratulations. Dan, I think you know what your boss, city administrator, thinks of you, and I think you know what this council thinks of you. As Peter just alluded to, this is an amazing story that basically have gone from zero to hero in 90 days. When we came in office, January 2nd, you got a blitzkrieg on Oxbow and an ultimatum, and an amazing job that you and your staff have done on this project. It is yeoman's work. It's hard to put into perspective the amount of innovation and work that's been done in 90 days by the Roswell City government as represented and led by you. Great leadership on the council's part as well. Great leadership on your part, Randy's. This has been a fantastic solution to an ill-conceived 15-and-a-half-year project that cost $15.4 million with a 33% completion rate, standing here today on March 29th. Wait, March 29th, right? Here's on March 29th, and this project is basically in its 16th year of conception, is at 33% completion. And in the next year and a half, you're going to complete that project. You're going to complete the final 66% of that project. The project is now a better project than its original design, and that was with the limitations of permitting, law, and a lot of pressure, and yet you still managed to bring and deliver us a better project for an incredibly small amount of money in relation to the amount of money that we've spent. So you can't say enough great things about you and your team and what this project is doing. This is a magnificent achievement, and a magnificent achievement done in 90 days. So major congratulations. There are parts of this that will be unfolding, as you know, as once we get into the Oxbow Action Plan. We'll be talking about some other stuff, but based upon the legality and the permits, what you guys got done was amazing, and what you could do incorporating in this plan was amazing. And it's amazing that this project is going to be done by Christmas of 2023. And hats off. Major congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir. We'll hold on to that until July of 2023. And then we'll really celebrate.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Mayor. Any further comments from the mayor and council before we certainly receive public comments this time? All right. All right. Any members of the public that would like to speak, ask questions or comments? Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
My name is Jeff Bradley. I live in Roswell, Kings Mill Court. The cut through to Elm Street, as you know, is very controversial. I think that should be revisited. You've got huge opposition to that in people that live in Kings Mill Court, Sloan Street, that whole broad area.
All right. Thank you, sir, for your comment. That certainly will be taken into account. Any further comments or questions from the public? Yes, sir.
I'm Perry Dragon. I add my compliments to the staff for doing an amazing job here. Just a couple of things. One, in terms of right-of-way acquisition, I would certainly encourage the city to use eminent domain or condemnation process routinely to get that done quickly and effectively. I've been through that process myself a number of times, and it really works well, in my opinion. The other thing is regarding Atlanta Street or Highway 9, as the case may be, this project only affects, I think, a small portion of Atlanta Street. But I go through that section every day, usually more than once. And if at all possible, I think those lanes need to be wider, because every time I go through there, or almost every time, somebody's on or across the center line. So taking evasive action, unfortunately, happens on a fairly regular basis there.
All right, thank you, sir, for your comment. Any further comments or questions from the public? All right, seeing none, thank you two gentlemen for your comments. We'll come back to the committee. Mayor Wilson?
So I failed to mention something that I think another incredible thing that's a significant seed change of Randy, your leadership, the leadership of the council, Dan, your leadership. For example, if you'll go back, Dan, just a couple slides, and we ran through this. So everybody's probably familiar with the Gerard and Davis report that came out in October of 2021, fairly lengthy report. Most people didn't read it. But basically, it puts into writing in a very long, detailed manner what transpired with Oxbow. Can you go to the spreadsheet, Dan? So one of the things that this city is committed to, this leadership of the city council, and leadership of Randy, and the leadership of everyone here in the Roswell government, City Hall is now committed to, is to use the word transparency, is to be transparent about everything we do, including the stuff that's not so good. And so what Dan and his team did was they took the Gerard and Davis report and they put it on paper in a spreadsheet. And that's what this is. And this shows every acquisition, every property acquisition, every easement acquisition. It shows what the property is. It shows what the appraisal was, if there was appraisal done, what the counter appraisal was, and what ultimately the purchase price and the date. So I know there's been a lot of speculation around Oxbow and the acquisition of property and the acquisition of easements. And this spreadsheet right here shows in detail all 25 parcels and what their geographic location is, who the owner is, and what the total size, square footage of the property or the easement is. It shows what, if there was an appraisal done, it shows what the appraisal price was, and it shows what the purchase price was and the date of the purchase. And so, talk about transparency. The city of Roswell is now making this an incredibly public document so that all of our residents can truly see what transpired. It's in the Gerard and Davis report, but it's a little complicated. This is it in simplicity. This is a spreadsheet showing all of the parcel and property acquisitions done on the Oxbow project. So again, I think another thing that I would say amazing credit to Dan and his team of putting this together and making it relatively simple.
Thank you, Mayor. And one point that I wanted to mention, all of this chart is history straight out of the report, except for this last line, which is the $270,000 that we're asking for closing out the items as part of this blanket right-of-way agreement we'll be bringing to you next month.
All right. Yes, Mayor Wilson.
And just, I'm not going to, I don't think this is going to be great breaking news to anybody, but this is not pretty. So as the public looks at this, you're not going to be saying, oh, we did a great job. Because you're going to say historically, we didn't do a great job if you look at the Oxbow project. So if you get through the details, you're probably going to have lots of questions, and we recognize that. But we wanted to make it public record. It's in the Gerard and Davis report that came out in October 2021, but this is to make it simpler, more discernible, and understandable. And we recognize that a lot of people are going to have a lot of questions. The answer is we didn't do a very good job as a city, and it shows up on this. And so, but we, again, didn't want to hide it.
Could I make one more
Yes,
comment,
Mr. Scalzi?
sir?
Yes.
Just on that point, thank you. And two things that have been done, I just want to make these comments for the benefit of the public, but we have adopted a right-of-way process that precludes this kind of thing from happening in the future. Claire Bruce is excellent at what she does. She's got all the accreditations to do this properly. And we will be bringing you that blanket right-of-way format with appraisals completed before we go through the acquisition process. And that's the right way to do it. And we've been doing that for a little bit of time now. The second piece is utility accommodation, which this council recently approved, which will give us better control both in planning and in executing utility agreements with contractors that can and did hold us up on the Oxbow project, and will limit their ability to do that going forward.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chairman. Can you add, there's two more pieces to that equation that are worth noting, I think, in reference to appraisal prices, or appraisals, forgive me. They're worth noting that part of our policy going forward. Would you care to comment on that, Dan? And also in reference to eminent domain, which was mentioned by one of our fine gentlemen here this in terms of a strategy perspective of how the city will handle property acquisition or easement acquisitions going forward.
Number one is we will get appraisals. It is part of our standard operating procedures for anything above the smallest monetary items, which are very, very low under state law. And number two, I think we have adopted the acquisition policy approved by the state, which presumes that every acquisition could go to an eminent domain proceeding, and we will follow the same procedures so that we have that right and opportunity should it become necessary. We'll always try to avoid it, but we're following the procedures as though that may be an end game in all cases.
Yes, Mayor Wilson?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, and I think one more thing, Dan, I think to add that we've talked about through this, I think of part of the process of not repeating the mistakes of the past, learning, getting better, making distinctions, and I think you'll see this more come from the council and from the city administrator, Mr. Knighton, going forward. But that there will be clarity on one from the Transportation Commission in relation to working with the RDOT going forward, and certainly having the interest of the public, the residents' perspective on any projects. But secondly, and more important, I think, from a standpoint of a guideline and a guidepost, is that when a project is put out, a transportation project is put out, there's going to be clarity from our city government, from our elected officials, what is the basis of the project, what is the scope of the project, what's the mission of the project, what's the timeline of the project, what's the cost of the project, what are the obstacles to the project. And then all these will be pieces of any potential project that we look in transportation that we'll be very clear about as an elected body and as a city government going forward, that we'll make sure that that's something we put forward to our residents going forward so that everybody has clear understanding of timeline, mission, cost, obstacles, reality. All those pieces will become part of our standard operating procedures on transportation projects so that there won't be an Oxbow Road again, and there won't have to be an Oxbow action plan. And silly people like me won't have to become the world's foremost expert on Oxbow Road. So I think that is very important that we have great clarity about that, and that our public knows, our residents know, our fellow residents know that there is a plan in place that's how we're going to have a dramatically different result going forward than what we demonstrated here in the past with Oxbow.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Wilson. Any further comments from the committee, from the mayor and council regarding this item? Seeing none, we would certainly desire to entertain a motion to move this item forward. Yes, a motion by Council Member Hills. We have a second. Second by Council Member Morthland. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you so much. It moves forward unanimously, and that is a significant item, of course, on the 100-day plan. All right. There are no further items on the agenda. We certainly appreciate everyone's attention to these matters for the staff, and certainly members of the public who are here and provided comment. We thank you very much. And this item, as it goes forward, will receive other opportunities for public comment. Seeing that there's no further business, we'll entertain a motion of adjournment. Motion by Council Member Vanstrom, second by Council Member Hills. All in favor? Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.